We're delighted to announce the release of the complete interview featuring Germain St-Denis. In this discussion, he elaborates on his people-first management approach and the creation of his latest book, Empowering People Through Caring Leadership. This insightful book is currently available on Amazon globally. We trust that Germain's perspectives will resonate with you as it did with us, and we are certain that you'll discover it to be truly motivating. In your mind, what exactly was your intention for the reader to get out of this book?
That's a great question, actually. When I first decided to write a book, my idea was to be able to share what has worked so well for me as a leader, even though I never expected to be a leader. But what I learned and what I found out works with people, and it's much, much better to try and work with people in a much positive, encouraging, empowering way than to try and beat them over the head with a stick. And I've learned that just over my career. And to be honest, in the first maybe 20 years of my life, I was observing other leaders and the impact that it has on people, their style, and some of it on a personal and professional nature. And there's a story that I tell in my book about when I was first promoted to a very significant senior role in Ottawa, which really then, that's when I kind of cemented the idea. That's the kind of leadership I want. So when I decided to write the book, I want to convey this, and hopefully this is something they can emulate.
That's great. Leads me to my next question. You actually have this group of executives that you pull together once a month or maybe twice a month. As I was reading the components of the book, I see this strategic side to it. And I was thinking, this looks like a really good workbook for that executive empowerment session. Was that intentional, or is that a bonus for you?
Well, actually, it's in part a bonus, but it was intentional from the beginning that it would make it useful and practical. Because my leadership program, I have a roundtable development leadership program. It's called Empowering Leaders in Action. And the inaction part is exactly because it has to be practical, actionable, and that's what we discuss. So when I have a number of people around the room, senior leaders, mid leaders, we basically talk about different things that are the current issues of the day. Everybody benefits by hearing what other people are doing to get around problems. They could learn from that, emulate it. And also everybody can maybe chip in and provide some ideas or suggestions when somebody has a problem. As it turned out, it's kind of a blend, because what I learned last year with my Empowering Leaders in Action program from the people and the feedback I got, I could see they were using they were using what they learned immediately in their jobs. And that just covers it exactly, right? That's rewarding.
I had a discussion with somebody else who is contemplating writing a book. And he said, I have been for the last 3 years journalizing my day-to-day effects. And I found in the journal a kind of a journey of development. So I thought to myself, and made me think of your book right away. He said, I was thinking I could evolve a book from this journal that would be kind of practical and tactical and show some strategies on how people can bring themselves from this position to this position. He said, I might be thinking of this selfishly, but I want to write a book that people will hang on to and return to rather than read it once and put it on the shelf. And I see, having gone through your book at an early stage, I see that same element in you. Could you talk to us about that element?
That's a very interesting point, Peter, because, I mean, as you know, I left the corporate world after I had my cancer treatment and recovery. I took some time off, but when I came back to work, I started blogging about my ideas about this whole caring leadership principle, people first strategies that really work. And I knew they worked. Other people used them. Then I said, well, okay, as I blog, actually, my wife said, why don't you put all these blogs together and do an ebook? I didn't have quite enough material and it just wasn't solid enough. But last year, after I started doing my Emerging Leaders in Action program, and I started getting feedback, and I see the reaction to what I talked about, how people got it and could use it. Then I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I did look back at everything I had talked about for the past 4 or 5 years. I went back further in my career, way, way back, but the idea was the same. My book is kind of meant to be a workbook. That's a word that you use that I really like. People can scribble their notes. They can add whatever they want. They can reference it for, I have lists of things. I have bullet lists. I have sample questions. If you want to coach your staff, these are good questions to start off with. So it is meant to be something that you refer to every week, every day, if you want to. Yeah, definitely.
That's really, really great. One of the other elements that I found in your book, and it's kind of just I think it's the way you wrapped it up. Throughout the book, you touched on some personal stories because that's how people evolve. I mean, and storytelling, I mean, that's what books are for, right? Ideally. But then I see right near the end, I saw some legacy footprints left there. And it kind of spurred my mind to thinking, I think he's going to take this another step. I think there's another book, at least in his mind. What are your thoughts?
That is a tricky question, Peter, but I'm not surprised from you because you've got that really sharp mind. Actually, I've talked about legacy before in the past. I feel so blessed that people I've worked with, people I've worked with for years ago and more recently, we stay in touch. They become friends, right? And some of them were friends when we worked together, but now it's more of a social. Sometimes they want advice, which is great. I'm happy to help. But so that, to me, that's kind of part of our legacy. Last May, I was on a podcast with Gary Crotaz from the UK, and I ended my podcast by saying, I talked about my legacy at the end of my podcast. I ended by saying the same thing that I say in my book. And he also read my book. He was one of the pre-readers. And he came back with that point. He said, you ended the podcast and you end your book on legacy. I would be happy if my legacy was that I help people be their best. It's simple as that. Legacy is so important. We don't think about it. There's actually, I was looking yesterday and I just ran across it accidentally. I wish I'd seen it before because I would have referred to it in my book. There's a fabulous video by Gary Vee. Everybody knows Gary Vee. And he says, legacy is stronger than currency. That's awesome because, yes, think about it, right? And I'll send you the link to the video. Absolutely brilliant the way he does it. So legacy matters. And, you can write your own bit if you want before you die. People do. But you can't write your legacy. It's written every day as we live, right? It's developed as we go. That's why I ended up with that. And I'm really happy that I did that.
I think it became more obvious to me as a parent as much as anything else. I think I've sometimes drawn conclusions about parenting being very similar to managing people. You have two choices in the way that, as far as I'm concerned, in the way that you'll either parent your children or manage your people. I think you alluded to it in an earlier clip about you can either beat them over the head with a stick, or you can maybe help them draw some conclusions about what's going on by merely provoking them, maybe promoting them with proper questioning and staging of things. And I think you've done a lot of that in your life. And I see it reflected in your book as well. And I think you did that with some purpose, right?
Oh, I absolutely did that on purpose. Most people can relate to parenting, even if they don't have children. They can relate to parenting. And there are many ways to raise kids. And I know I've made tons of mistakes, but I've done some things right. And it's nice to see how things evolve. And so in my book, when I talk about leaders as being coaches, it's the same idea. As a leader, sometimes I won't use the word parent because that's family, that's different, but you have to be a coach. Sometimes you just have to be an ear to listen. You can't be a psychologist, but you can ask questions and see if something's not right, but their well-being, and maybe suggest that they take some time or whatever. So there are lots of similarities, and I did want to have that in my book because this book is based on real stories. For the large part, this is my journey, my leadership journey. I have included as many real stories as possible. My wife says, you just opened up completely. Why not? It's me. It's a book about my journey. So I have to do that, to really to make it valuable. It's more valuable than some textbook written by somebody who's never led people, right? So that's the whole idea of doing it in a way that when you care, people see that you care. People realize that you care, and they will engage more, right? And if they have issues, you can help them, showing that you care. Ask them good questions, find out about their personal life a little bit, not to invade their privacy, but sometimes to see, is there something there that's impacting the performance at work? And if there is, you got to help people get out of it.
In the book, one thing that emanates throughout every page of it, the values that you have, that just sings like throughout, because never at one time do I see you talking like, oh, this is how I did this, and this is how I did this, and like it's not like that preachy workbook. It's more about like, this is what happened to me. Here are some side effects. Here's what took place, right? Here's the application that'll change things in your life. That's how I found it. So I think that your book will resonate with people who meet with those values.
I do hope so. I mean, values are really, really important to me. I mean, your integrity, your values, they're everything, right? And I'm very fortunate because I grew up in a loving family, and our parents had great values. We were poor, but we never lacked anything. They always worried about our well-being. I worked with my dad on the farm. He would teach us how to do something when we'd made mistakes. Sometimes he would get angry, but hey, that's the way it is. But never beat us up with a stick. Just explain this is what you do instead, and go try again. So, and I've always kept that. I mean, those my childhood, my upbringing certainly impact my values as an adult. There's no question. And I'm glad that I have, for the most part, good values. And so I bring this to my leadership style. The story that I talk about in my book in Ottawa, when I received that very, very significant promotion, I was very, very surprised that they had selected me. Very surprised. And I worried, what are the rest of the people going to think? Do they see me as being strong enough? So I knew how competent they were. And I knew that to succeed, I had to help them. If I helped them, we would all succeed. That's the way I did it. So I started to learn more and more about each of them. I didn't know everybody. I didn't even know half of the group. But I started to learn more and more about everybody. This is how we became a very, very successful unit. And I've repeated that every time, every other job in my career. And it's always worked. Treat people well, show them that you care. And I know I'm repeating myself, but it's always the same message. Right? Caring leadership and people first principles work.
I found also, I had one of those similar epiphanies back when I was working for a large corporate retailing operation. Their original style was top down, push it into your head, almost to kind of brainwash you so that you kind of stood there and kind of did the old puppet thing, where you memorized a certain thing and you repeated it and thinking, what that scared me, right? I mean, I just put us all into like that Stepford wife type thing, Whereas I actually, when they pushed it to me, I thought, oh my God, I can't do this, because I knew I had to turn around and talk to some people just like yourself who I didn't know, I wasn't totally familiar with. I was in a new territory that I knew nothing about. This is the first time I'd ever lived in London, Ontario. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do with it? And I literally converted what was pushed at me into an experiential thing. So rather than give them the 3-ring binder that they gave me to go out and tell the troops what to do, this always sticks with me. I said, I got this really wonderful show. I got this videos, and I've got songs, and I got interaction, and that's how I learned that from you. And now you just want me to go shove this 3-ring binder up their nose. So what I did is I replicated this event, that I was at. It cost me a little money, but I replicated the event and I let people enjoy the transfer of information. You speak to that a little bit in your values and the way that you process information during your appointment in Ottawa. That's what resonated. That's the first thing I thought of when I read that part. It's like I'm thinking, oh, this is just like me in Mont Tremblant, and I just came back to London, and I didn't know anybody. In fact, I had an adversary in London because he thought he should have been made the supervisor. I know that you've gone through those things too, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. You can't deal with that with a stick. You have to go in soft. You have to go in experiential. You have to go in investigative, right?
You have to, and so you have to get, if you want to get people to engage, you have to give them a voice, and you have to explain why you're doing something. So if you're asked from more executive leaders, this is what we're doing. I agree with you. Sending down, it's not dreaming binders anymore, but it's long, long emails about, okay, this is now how we do things, and follow all these procedures, and magic will happen. Okay, not quite. So I was in that boat several times where, especially after acquisitions, it's a difficult transition sometimes. So you get direction, you get asked to do something, and you're kind of thinking, how is that going to work with my team or my teams? I have multiple teams. How is that going to work? So what I did is I turned around and I tell them, okay, this is what we're asked to do. And sometimes I didn't always agree, but I said, this is what we're asked to do. We got a job to do, get paid. We got to produce results. How can we do it? Give me your input. Give me your input. Tell me how you will do it, or tell me what you see as potential issues. We'll address them. We'll get started. So give people a voice, get them to engage. And if you get to engage early, even though the direction has already been set, has come down, the what has been decided, but how we do it and how we make it work for our own areas and our own clients, because sometimes it impacted clients significantly, how we make it work. And my people were always terrific because they were always so cooperative. They would say, oh, okay, well, I have this idea, or I have this client. Oh, they're not going to like that. Well, how are we going to deal with it? It's always a question of give people a meaningful role in making results happen. Because the role that you play, everybody wants to have some meaningful role somewhere. Just like we have meaningful relationships, and you and I have had one for 20 years or whatever. Meaningful relationships, work has to have meaning, right? It really boils down to that. Work has to have meaning. And if our work has meaning and we agree with the purpose, it just changes everything. People get engaged so much more. And when people are engaged and motivated, you get better results.
You saw from my post just the other day, change isn't managed, it's inspired. I think your book is a cornerstone to that.
Thank you. Well, that's a great analogy. But yeah, I loved your post yesterday, and I love that quote that, change has to be inspired. I like that a lot. A lot of what we do in leadership roles actually is manage change. And especially when you go through acquisitions or you go through a recession, you go through, like we went through 9/11 terrorist attack, and that had a huge impact, of course, on all the people, but on businesses afterwards. In order for change to really be successful, change management in the traditional sense is still there, but it's never about all of the methodologies and following and doing all the right things. The tick boxes are important, but it's change leadership is what we need. That's what I talk about. And in my book, there's a whole paragraph about dealing with tough stuff. That's what I call it. And it has a lot to do with dealing with change within your group, change imposed on your group, change in yourself, because we have to change too. We have to adapt. Right? And to be inspired to change and to adapt takes a good leader. It takes someone who people can believe in and they see. But sometimes it goes back to passion. Like my people always saw that I was passionate about what we did. I was passionate about doing well, being successful, helping them and showcasing them, right? And I had a lot of success in promoting my people and getting them accolades and promotions and extra top bonuses. And it was great because I kind of learned how to do it for them, but it was never using a stick, as you said, right? When we talk about leading change, and I had a great discussion with Michael Leckie, who's a change leadership expert and former executive, and he has a really great book on leading change. He refers to active change by empowering people. enabling people, which is the same idea as what I talk in my book, right? I talk about empowering people. If you empower them, trust them, get them involved, get their buy-in, then the changes you're going to make may end up actually even better than what you expected. The benefits may be better than what you expected if you get people engaged, motivated, and inspired to jump in. But on the other hand, if you don't, and you start with just, these are our new processes and procedures, follow them, period, you're going to end up with a disaster. And it's no wonder that in the past, something like 70% of major initiatives failed because it didn't involve the people. My way of looking at things is look at the people first aspect before making some of these decisions. What's the impact on your people? How can you help make that impact more positive on them and on the organization as a result? So I think we have to adapt, and that's a message. And if you want to talk about what comes next in the future, adaptability to change of every kind is really, really a key component.
I like to simplify things, and I think our dear friend Ryan Folan got that stuck in my mind now because I've worked so diligently with him on this 3-1-3 thing, and I just listened to an old podcast I did with him about how we should simplify our lives, and only address things in threes. I'm going to kind of push you a little bit here on this last question. If there was 3 things that you would love your readers to get out of this book, what would they be?
That's an interesting question, Peter. I hadn't really talked about that, even though I'm familiar with Ryan's 3-1-3, but I haven't gone there in quite a long time. I think the number one thing is if you're going to lead people, you have to care about your people, and about their well-being. That's the number one, I think. Care about them and about their well-being, and success will come. Number 2, I would say treat people as partners so that they can engage in the work that needs to be done. And that way they become motivated, they become inspired, right? Same as with leading change, they become inspired, and they will provide more than you would ever think. At number 3 is I would say is be a coach. Always think as a coach. And if you think of it as a coach as you help people develop, because that's part of our responsibility as a leader. You're responsible to get the work done. But as you get the work done, you're responsible to help your people develop, right? Like we develop. So I would say those are the 3 things that really come to mind. If they don't get that out of my book, I'd like to hear from them, and I'd like to understand what did I miss and what should I emphasize? Because this book is supposed to be a guide, a workbook, a practical guide. And I think those 3 things are really, really critical.
Well, there you have it. Germain's approach to project management, working with people rather than through them. The nuances of managing individuals are vast, yet Germain has adeptly distilled these complexities for us. We extend our gratitude once again to Germain for his time and the enlightening discussion, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you for listening.